Were they really who we thought they were? Did we ever truly know them at all? Behind the glittering facades of fame and fortune, some celebrities harbored secrets so deep that only their passing brought them to light. Their carefully constructed public personas shattered, revealing lives far more complex than fans ever imagined. Number 1. Prince, music legend's hidden pain. When Prince Rogers Nelson was found unresponsive in an elevator at his Paisley Park estate on April 21, 2016, the world mourned the loss of a musical genius. The flamboyant performer, known for his explosive stage presence, sexual charisma, and unmatched musical versatility, had seemingly defied aging, remaining as enigmatic and energetic as ever at 57. But in the aftermath of his shocking death, a very different picture of the Purple Rain superstar emerged. The medical examiner's report delivered the first bombshell. Prince had died from an accidental overdose of fentanyl, a synthetic opioid 50 times more potent than heroin. For fans who knew Prince as a clean-living Jehovah's Witness who didn't even allow cursing in his presence, the news was incomprehensible. This was the man who once sang about eschewing drugs in Let's Go Crazy, telling his fans there was something else better than getting high. As investigators pieced together Prince's final weeks, a heartbreaking secret life came into focus. For years, the diminutive star had been suffering in silence with excruciating hip pain, likely the result of decades of high-energy performances in high-heeled boots. Friends reported he'd undergone hip surgery years before but continued to experience chronic pain. Rather than revealing his physical vulnerability to the world, Prince had apparently been self-medicating. Investigators discovered countless pills throughout Paisley Park, many hidden in vitamin bottles and other containers. The musician had been taking painkillers for years without anyone in his inner circle fully understanding the extent of his dependency. In the weeks before his death, Prince had become so concerned about his own use that he'd agreed to meet with addiction specialists. Tragically, he died just one day before a doctor was scheduled to arrive at Paisley Park for an initial consultation. Perhaps most poignant were the revelations about Prince's extraordinary acts of anonymous charity. After his death, numerous stories emerged about his secret philanthropic work. Prince had quietly funded solar panels for families in California, anonymously paid for a community center in Louisville, supported environmental activists, and donated to countless causes without ever seeking recognition. He'd even personally delivered food to community organizations, but insisted that his involvement remain hidden. Van Jones, a CNN commentator and friend of the musician, eventually revealed that Prince had been the anonymous benefactor behind Green for All, an initiative that created green jobs in disadvantaged communities. He did not want it to be known publicly, and he did not want us to say it. But I'm going to say it because the world needs to know that it wasn't just the music, Jones said in an emotional interview after Prince's death. The musician who had appeared so confident on stage had lived with physical pain most fans never suspected, battling private demons while continuing to create extraordinary music until the very end. The gap between his vibrant public persona and his private suffering revealed just how little the public truly knew about the musical genius they thought they understood. Number 2. Robin Williams, the laughing face of depression. When news broke on August 11, 2014, that beloved comedian Robin Williams had taken his own life at age 63, the collective shock was palpable. How could a man who had made generations laugh so hard be in such profound pain? Williams' manic energy, rapid-fire improvisations, and seemingly boundless enthusiasm had defined his public persona for decades. His death forced a reckoning with the stark reality behind the smiles. Initial media reports suggested that Williams had been suffering from depression and had recently entered a rehabilitation facility to maintain his sobriety. The actor had been open about his struggles with alcoholism and cocaine addiction in the 1970s and early 1980s, and had experienced relapse periods over the years. But as his widow Susan Schneider Williams would later reveal, there was far more to the story. In October 2016, Susan published The Terrorist Inside My Husband's Brain in the medical journal Neurology. The essay detailed William's hellish final years, battling an undiagnosed neurodegenerative disorder. What doctors initially thought might be Parkinson's disease was posthumously diagnosed as Lewy body dementia, the second most common type of progressive dementia after Alzheimer's. The disease had been silently ravaging William's brain, causing severe anxiety, delusions, memory problems, and physical symptoms that baffled his doctors. Susan described how her husband experienced the clinical depression which would never abate, the Parkinson's-like symptoms, and the slight tremor in his left hand. He repeatedly asked her, "Do I have Alzheimer's, dementia, am I crazy?" While filming Night at the Museum 3 in 2014, Williams struggled to remember even a single line of dialogue, a terrifying development for an actor renowned for his improvisational genius and photographic memory. Robin was losing his mind and he was aware of it, Susan wrote. Can you imagine the pain he felt as he experienced himself disintegrating? After William's death, friends and colleagues began sharing stories that painted a more nuanced picture of the comedian than his hyperkinetic public image suggested. Though known for his exuberant characters and seemingly inexhaustible energy, the Private Williams was often described as thoughtful, gentle, and sometimes melancholic. Fellow comedian Gary Shandling once observed that Williams' frenetic comedy style worked as a defense mechanism, noting, "You sense a vulnerability." Williams had also been a devoted humanitarian, co-founding Comic Relief USA, which raised over $80 million for homeless assistance, and regularly performing for American troops overseas. He visited children's hospitals without publicity and famously included a clause in his film contracts requiring the hiring of homeless people as part of the production staff. Perhaps most revealing was a story shared by Williams' longtime friend Christopher Reeve. After the Superman actor's tragic horse riding accident in 1995 that left him paralyzed, Williams was the first person to visit him in the hospital. Disguised as a Russian doctor performing a proctological exam, Williams made Reeve laugh for the first time since his accident. Later, when Reeve needed expensive equipment and specialized treatments not covered by insurance, Williams anonymously covered all costs. Robin Williams' death pulled back the curtain on a man far more complex than his hyperactive public persona suggested, someone fighting invisible battles while continuing to bring joy to millions. His struggle illuminated the often unseen reality that those who make us laugh the hardest may be fighting the darkest demons. Number 3. Whitney Houston, Diva's Descent into Darkness. When Whitney Houston was found submerged in a bathtub at the Beverly Hilton Hotel on February 11, 2012, the 48-year-old singer's death seemed a tragic but not entirely surprising end to a public downward spiral. The golden-voiced diva who had once been America's sweetheart had spent years battling drug addiction in full view of the public. But posthumous revelations painted a far more complicated picture of Houston's life than most fans understood. The coroner's report listed the official cause of death as accidental drowning, with heart disease and cocaine use as contributing factors. Toxicology tests detected multiple substances in Houston's system, including cocaine, marijuana, Xanax, Benadryl, and the muscle relaxant Flexeril. The report provided clinical confirmation of battles that Houston had sometimes acknowledged but never fully explained. What emerged after her death, however, was a life story far more nuanced than the simplistic narrative of a star destroyed by drugs. In the documentary Whitney, released 6 years after her death, the singer's longtime assistant Mary Jones and brother Gary Houston revealed a bombshell that Houston had kept hidden her entire life. She had been sexually abused as a child by her cousin Dee Dee Warwick, sister of singer Dionne Warwick. According to her family members, this childhood trauma haunted Houston throughout her life and may have contributed to her struggles with addiction and her complicated relationship with her own sexuality. The revelation helped explain aspects of Houston's personality that had puzzled even those close to her, including her sometimes defensive demeanor and intense need for privacy. The documentary also shed light on Houston's relationship with Robin Crawford, her longtime friend and former assistant. For years, rumors had circulated about the nature of their relationship. After Houston's death, Crawford finally confirmed in her 2019 memoir, A Song for You, that the two had been romantic partners in the early years of Houston's career. Crawford described their relationship as physical and emotional, but wrote that it ended in the early 1980s when Houston signed with Clive Davis at Arista Records. She said we shouldn't be physical anymore because it would make our journey even more difficult, Crawford wrote. She said if people find out about us, they would use this against us, and back in the 80s that's how it felt. Houston's ex-husband Bobby Brown and several family members later confirmed they had been aware of the relationship. This aspect of Houston's life had been carefully concealed from the public, with her management team crafting a wholesome image that they believed would appeal to mainstream America in the 1980s. The pressure of maintaining this carefully constructed public persona while hiding core aspects of her identity likely took an enormous toll on Houston. Multiple biographers have suggested that her marriage to Brown, while certainly involving genuine affection, also served in part as a shield against rumors about her sexuality in an era and industry that wasn't ready to accept a bisexual black female superstar. Financial revelations after Houston's death also shocked many fans. Despite having earned hundreds of millions during her career, Houston had been nearly broke when she died. Years of drug use, mismanagement, and lavish spending had depleted her fortune. She had reportedly borrowed $100 million from her mentor Clive Davis to maintain appearances in her final years. The Whitney Houston the public thought they knew, the church-raised songbird with the angelic voice who became America's princess, was a carefully crafted image that concealed a far more complicated woman struggling with childhood trauma, hidden sexuality, and the suffocating pressures of fame. Her death removed the veil from a life far more complex and painful than most fans ever suspected. Number 4. Heath Ledger, the method actor's last role. When Heath Ledger was found dead in his Manhattan apartment on January 22, 2008, from an accidental overdose of prescription medications, the 28-year-old actor was at the pinnacle of his career. He had just completed his transformative performance as the Joker in Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight, a role that would posthumously earn him an Academy Award. But in the aftermath of his shocking death, friends and family revealed that Ledger's intense commitment to his craft had taken a devastating toll few outsiders recognized. The New York Medical Examiner's report listed the cause of death as acute intoxication from the combined effects of 6 different prescription drugs: oxycodone, hydrocodone, diazepam, temazepam, alprazolam, and doxylamine. These medications, used to treat pain, anxiety, and insomnia, painted a picture of a young man in significant psychological distress. As details emerged following his death, it became clear that Ledger had been struggling with chronic insomnia for months. The actor had told the New York Times that while filming The Dark Knight, he was averaging just 2 hours of sleep per night. "I couldn't stop thinking, my body was exhausted and my mind was still going," he said in one of his final interviews. He admitted to taking Ambien sleeping pills, which would sometimes leave him in a stupor for only an hour before he'd wake again, his mind racing. Friends and colleagues began sharing stories about Ledger's extreme method acting techniques, particularly regarding his preparation for playing the Joker. Director Christopher Nolan revealed that Ledger had spent 6 weeks in isolation developing the character's disturbed psychology, voice, and physical mannerisms. He kept a diary written from the Joker's perspective, filled with images of hyenas, clowns, comic strips, and notes about what made the character tick. Ledger's father Kim later shared pages from this Joker diary in a documentary about his son's life. The journal ended with the chilling words "bye-bye" scrawled across a page. The actor had inscribed quotes from Anthony Burgess, A Clockwork Orange, and pictures of Malcolm McDowell as the ultraviolet Alex, alongside images of hyenas and clowns from Batman comics. One page featured a hospital scene from Batman with the words "nurse" scribbled over it, foreshadowing the Joker's nurse disguise scene in the film. Cinematographer Nicola Pecorini, who worked with Ledger on his final film, The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus, revealed that the actor had stopped using recreational drugs entirely but struggled with prescription medications for his insomnia. He used to take these hardcore sleeping pills, but he was still energized, Pecorini said, describing how Ledger would frequently go days with minimal sleep while filming. The portrait that emerged after Ledger's death was of a deeply committed artist whose dedication to authentically portraying disturbed characters may have contributed to his own psychological distress. His Joker performance required him to embody pure anarchic evil, a mindset that proved difficult to compartmentalize. As Michael Caine, who co-starred in The Dark Knight, later observed, "I believe Heath kind of overdid it with the Joker character. He was incredibly intense in his role. I think he withdrew into that character so much that it became a burden." Ledger's personal life also revealed surprising depths. Though the public knew him primarily for his high-profile relationship with actress Michelle Williams, with whom he had a daughter, Matilda, Ledger had been deeply involved in creative pursuits beyond acting. He had directed music videos, was developing skills as a photographer, and had plans to direct feature films. After his death, friends revealed his extensive knowledge of art, literature, and music that belied his public image as merely a handsome leading man. The actor had also been engaged in private philanthropy work, particularly related to climate change. He had been developing a documentary about chess prodigy Nick Duffy and had self-funded projects to support various environmental causes without publicity. These facets of his personality, the intellectual, the artist, the activist, were largely unknown to the public during his lifetime. What emerged after Ledger's death was the image of a profoundly sensitive artist who had pushed himself to psychological extremes for his craft, paying a price higher than anyone realized. The gap between his public persona as a charismatic young star and the tortured, sleep-deprived method actor he had become in his final months revealed how little the public truly knew about the man behind the performances. Number 5. Michael Jackson, the King of Pop's private torment. When Michael Jackson died on June 25, 2009, from an overdose of the surgical anesthetic propofol, the 50-year-old pop icon had already lived several lifetimes in the public eye. From child star to the biggest entertainer on the planet to tabloid fixture, Jackson's transformation had played out under constant scrutiny for over 4 decades. Yet his death and the subsequent investigation revealed a private existence so bizarre and isolated that even his most devoted fans were stunned. The circumstances of Jackson's death immediately raised questions. Why would a seemingly healthy man preparing for a major concert tour need a surgical anesthetic just to sleep? The investigation revealed that Jackson had been receiving nightly propofol infusions for months, administered by his personal physician Conrad Murray in a home setting, a practice so dangerous and inappropriate that it eventually led to Murray's conviction for involuntary manslaughter. What emerged after Jackson's death was a portrait of extraordinary isolation and dependency. Despite his immense wealth and fame, Jackson had been living a nomadic existence for years, moving between rented mansions with his 3 children and an entourage of staff. Financially, the singer, who had once been worth over $1 billion, was nearly $500 million in debt when he died, having burned through his fortune through extravagant spending, legal settlements, and increasingly desperate financial deals. The autopsy findings were equally shocking. The man who had once embodied fluid movement and athletic grace weighed just 132 pounds at death and suffered from arthritis, lung inflammation, and an enlarged prostate. His lips, eyebrows, and hairline were tattooed. His skin was covered in bandages hiding injection sites. The autopsy confirmed what many had speculated. Jackson's dramatic physical transformation over the decades had been achieved through numerous plastic surgeries and skin-lightening treatments. Most surprising to many fans was the extent of Jackson's prescription drug use. Investigators found dozens of medications in his home, many prescribed under various aliases. The star had been seeing multiple doctors simultaneously and had been battling addiction issues for decades, stemming back to the 1984 Pepsi commercial incident that left him with severe burn injuries and initiated his relationship with painkillers. Former members of Jackson's staff began speaking out after his death, describing a man who lived in fear, often staying awake for days at a time, believing people were plotting against him. One former security guard described finding Jackson wandering the grounds of his estate at night, disoriented from medication. Others described bizarre security protocols, including constant bedroom door locks, panic buttons, and elaborate methods to maintain privacy. The most heartbreaking revelations involved Jackson's persistent feelings of isolation. Despite being one of the most famous people on the planet, Jackson had few genuine friendships and appeared profoundly lonely. His closest relationships were with his children and a small circle of staff members who had essentially become surrogate family. Jackson's physical appearance, a source of public fascination and often cruel mockery, was revealed to be the result of a complex combination of factors, including the skin condition vitiligo, which Jackson had disclosed but many had doubted, multiple plastic surgeries, and a deep self-loathing that stemmed from childhood psychological abuse. According to family members who spoke out after his death, Jackson's father Joe had regularly mocked young Michael's appearance, particularly his nose, creating insecurities that plagued him into adulthood. Perhaps most surprising to the public was the contrast between Jackson's chaotic personal life and his meticulous professionalism as an artist. Footage from rehearsals for the This Is It tour, filmed just days before his death, showed a performer still in complete command of his craft, remembering complex choreography, directing band arrangements, and displaying the perfectionism that had defined his career. The King of Pop had lived his entire life in the spotlight, yet the person revealed after his death, vulnerable, isolated, medicated, and desperately seeking peace, seemed almost unrecognizable from the moonwalking superstar the world thought it knew. His death removed the careful stage management that had surrounded him for decades, revealing a man far more human and fragile than his seemingly superhuman performing persona had suggested. Would these stars still be with us if we'd known their true struggles? Can fame itself create the conditions for such profound disconnection between public image and private reality? While celebrity deaths often feel like personal losses to fans who have invested in these larger-than-life figures, perhaps the greatest tragedy lies in how utterly alone these icons often felt, despite being loved by millions. How many other stars might be suffering silently behind the smiles and performances we celebrate?